I've always been interested in psychedelic drugs. Ever since I first tried acid a long time ago when I was younger, I knew that psychedelics offer more than just a stimulating sense of well-being. They offer a greater insight into one's mind and that of other people. However, it's been hard to find acid, so I've resorted to a few other things here and there, such as weed, alcohol, complete brain crap now that I've done mescaline. This wasn't the first time I've tried mescaline either. The first time, I ate one San Pedro and had a decent experience. Since the cactus was easily available, I've tried a few other times to get a good trip. I bought some Peruvian torch cacti, thinking they were somehow stronger than San Pedros, but they're not. It's just a misconception. So after a not so special experience on a 12-inch cactus and a half of a 12, I decided to buy some 12-inch San Pedro. Today, before work, I drank two 12-inch San Pedros. Normally I wouldn't trip before work, but I didn't expect to trip that hard, because in the past, the Peruvians were mild. Unlike the Peruvians though, I started to feel a trip coming on within 30 minutes of the ingestion. I started to feel apprehensive about having to work because I felt this inner feeling that told me that I was going to trip hard. I stuck with it though and thought, screw it, I want to see what will happen if I trip at work. So I went anyway. What happened next is one of the greatest days of my life. I work in a restaurant, so social interaction is everywhere, and when the mescaline started to kick in, my whole entire way of communicating with people changed. Sure, I was seeing little hallucinations here and there and little quirky visuals, but that was not what interested me. I was suddenly overcome by an extreme awareness of affection and appreciation for others. When I started a conversation with someone, instead of automatically thinking about myself and how to direct attention to myself, which is what many individuals do, I was able to empathise with others immediately and understand their emotional state. I was able to openly and fluently express my emotions and wanted to soothe other people who were feeling down. About an hour into the experience, I was starting to feel exactly what mescaline really was capable of, something I've never felt on it before. This chemical made me feel love, unselfish appreciation to things other than myself, and giving my unselfishness to others made me feel great, and my positive attitude brushed off on them. I started to feel ultimate maturity coming on. The realisation that making others feel good about their work and their job made them feel great, and me good too, rather than constantly whining and trying to feed my ego. After a while longer, time started to have less meaning. I was able to do my job pretty well. The mescaline didn't really affect my memory or job skills, but it definitely took the work off my mind. Time probably didn't have meaning, because I never felt like I had to get anywhere, I was already there. When I got home from work, I called my parents just to see how their day went, something I don't normally do, and I realised that I should do it more often, and felt deep love for them, which felt good. This was the most significant experience I've ever had from a drug. It taught me great respect for myself and, most importantly, other life. There are many other powerful effects too, which I'll not go into. It's almost as if mescaline takes one out of the survival mode one is accustomed to, and puts one in touch with a higher awareness. There is a sad side to the drug, however, an awareness of the many problems with society. That's why I had to write this report, because I want others to experience what I have. And I'm sure if they did, their lives may become better. This whole world would benefit from this drug, but mescaline is not something that one can do every day obliviously, because one still has to make sure he does the basic things to survive. I will surely be visiting this realm again though, because it is divine. I had heard of the plant from friends who had taken it. I found their experiences varied and rather bizarre, but was before I tried it myself. Armando, who was out from Peru, agreed to provide us with a dried cactus and guide us through what he called the gates of San Pedro. We started about 9 AM one Saturday by ingesting the plant, one handful each, and then once the nausea had passed, or been embraced, we embarked on a blindfolded meditation, the rainbow light meditation, in which our guide took us through each chakra from root to crown. At each chakra, we visualised the corresponding colour, chanted a mantra, focused on the breath and movement which was unique to that chakra. The purpose of this was to facilitate opening, and at each stage I could feel the energy swirling up until we reached the crown chakra, at which stage my spirit or soul literally exploded out of the top of my head and soared up into space on what I believe was the universe. Silence, darkness, and complete love and compassion surrounded me. I was not a separate entity, but one with everything. I felt inseparable from the universe, as if I was in fact the whole universe itself, and I sensed an increased consciousness, an awareness that was total and unlimited, endless. I realised that everything me on this earth, had experienced up until this point in my life was not real. It's like being in The Matrix, the movie, and then having the plug pulled and suddenly have a new reality. It's the realisation that life as we know it is in fact a manifestation produced by our consciousness, or the universal consciousness. I believe now that we manifest ourselves on this and other planets to learn and grow spiritually. The Earth is one of the fastest planets that we can grow spiritually, and this is generally achieved by what we perceive as human suffering. When we become enlightened, that is, we move out of the victim archetype and into one where we embrace everything and believe that everything happens for a reason, and then we are able to manifest on Earth whatever we want. But I digress. Anyway, here I am in this matrix space, and in truth, just a little bit freaked out. So I start looking around in the blackness and start to see faint lights like distant hazy stars floating around, and I'm thinking, angels? And then start to wonder if there is a heaven and what it would look like, and in that instant, I heard a booming voice saying, "Welcome to Nirvana Lounge." And looking around, I see this bright and sunny pool-like setting, and there sits Armando, and one of the other guys in our group who was trained to be a shaman like him. I stayed here for a while, laughing and talking in the sunshine, and then later, when I was calmer, decided to go back. I start wondering how I'm going to get back to my body, and then instantly, I'm back in space, slowly feeling the tug and urge to return, and simultaneously feeling the fear of going back to an existence that's not real. I saw my life on Earth through a window, me sitting blindfolded on the floor, the group in the room, my life playing out before me, but without me. Did I want to go back? Could I stay? But what would happen to me here? I felt I had to return, but how? I started to get a bit panicky, and then I heard a voice in my head, Armando, saying breathe. And so I did, and next thing, I felt my body around me. The aches from sitting too long in one position, the sound of my breath, and all my senses prickled and felt alive. It was a truly awakening experience, one that we'll strive to attain without the aid of Mescaline, which San Pedro is. It took some time to process the information I gained from my trip, but I am grateful for the knowledge and the experience. It all began on a Sunday in early June 2007. I awoke with a feeling that it would be a day that would change my outlook and that my life would never be quite the same again. This was to be my first experience of the drug known as mescaline. Although I kept the dosage relatively low, it must be said that I was not expecting such a powerful spiritual experience. I had read pretty much all that there is to read on the subject, but was still unsure about exactly how it would affect me. I ingested tea made from 8 inches of fresh cacti that was acidified with lemon juice, and within 90 minutes, experienced changes to my thought patterns and an overall increase in my well-being. I consumed several cups of lemon and ginger tea with honey throughout the experience, and suffered no nausea or stomach irritation. The feeling the cactus tea gave me for the first 3 hours was one of stimulation and joyfulness. At around the 3-hour mark, the stimulation gave birth to a profound blissful euphoria, with the world around me transformed into another place entirely. Everything looked familiar to me. It was akin to a childhood perception of the world that was brand new, being seen for the first time. I spent the day in nature full of empathy, simply admiring the beauty of creation, and wondered how on earth we let ourselves destroy such perfection. At one point near the beginning of the trip, I was walking along a trail in a local park and had a very powerful healing experience. As the drug took greater and greater hold, I began to be filled with a great, overwhelming fear that filled every cell of my being. At one point, the fear was all-consuming, and I could do nothing to hold it back. It seemed to be a deep-seated feeling that I had held onto for a long time, and knew very well, and I was now staring it full in the face. The mescaline was presenting me with this feeling I owned, and not letting me go until I just sat down and accepted it. This experience lasted some 30 minutes or so, and although it was most unpleasant, has left me with a far greater understanding of how I am put together. I now feel as though I have grown as a person as a result of this experience. Some time was spent exploring woods and vast meadows. Some time was spent marvelling the detail of the roots and bark of trees. There was one moment, however, where I truly understood how Aldous Huxley must have felt when he saw that infamous rose. The meadow that I was in was full of wild flowers, unusual grasses, and life of all kinds, and I found my attention turned to a single yellow buttercup and was captivated by this single flower amongst so many others. A moment later, my awareness shifted so completely that all of physical reality was tuned out completely, and I was aware of nothing but myself and the buttercup in a glowing space of golden and white light. There was a sense of complete and total bliss, and at that moment I knew that I was truly one with the universe. There was no time there, no past, no future, just the buttercup and myself in this golden glow of eternity, the great being of ultimate reality. An amount of time passed whilst I was in this state, and I'm not sure how much. On coming back to physical reality, I was aware of a complete piece of living and existing, that just writing about it brings a tear to my eye. I looked around that meadow again and understood the purpose of life, and that we must express this oneness in all that we do, for it is this that brings us true happiness. It was about 4.5 hours now since ingestion, and the mescaline was very much in full effect. The world around me looked the way it did when I was a child. Houses looked like the gingerbread cottage in the book Hansel and Gretel. I decided that I should head back towards my house, as I was somewhat overwhelmed and felt a tad vulnerable in my state of mind. I got lost a couple of times in the nature reserve that I was in, and had to ask a couple of times for directions. Talking to people was quite tense, as I struggled not to be too distracted when talking to them. I did my best to act normal, and managed to pull it off quite well. Although, some way across the middle of a trail that I was on, I saw 2 joggers coming towards me, a man and a woman. The trail was about 12 feet wide, and there was plenty of space for us all to pass quite comfortably. However, I had stopped and stood to the right of the trail so that they could pass without any obstruction at all, and the woman kept jogging straight for me. On her approach, I moved my body sideways as she made no effort to change her course. She passed me, brushing my clothes with hers as she went, and said, "Good afternoon." It gave me a very strange, self-satisfied look. When past me, I glanced over my shoulder to see her smirk at the man that was jogging with her. He returned her smirk as they carried on their way. After this experience, I was sure that she knew that I was tripping, and I was trying to fuck with my mind and play games. I spent the next couple of moments thinking about the situation, before concluding that I needed to be more careful around people that I do not know, as letting them know that I am in a state of psychedelic intoxication leaves me in a place of great vulnerability. After getting lost a few more times, I finally found the road back to my house and followed the road back, seeing enormous detail in everything that I passed. Everything felt friendly and vibrant, and fortunately, my road was quiet for the time of day, and I joyfully walked the 15 minutes it took back to my humble house without a care in my mind. On opening the front door to my house, I saw the inside of my house like it was lit up in neon lights, a tad freaky. Everything was so alive and detailed as it was still daylight outside. For many hours I lay on my bed with my eyes closed, being shown the power of the infinite creative energy of God, and how this energy is expressed sexually. This energy ran from the crown of my head, down my body and out through my base chakra. The mescaline was so typically a phenethylamine in its effect, and felt a lot like MDMA, except there was no rush but a constant surge of euphoria. The feeling made my body feel hot and serotonergic, very much like E. What surprised me the most is that the trip felt so clean and natural and not plant-like at all. What I mean by that is, it didn't feel like a mixture of alkaloids and toxic substances that were causing the effects, like some plant-based entheogens do, but it was clear to me that the primary effects were caused by a single compound. In other words, it felt like I'd taken a pill of some kind. The closed-eye visuals were a little cheesy and resembled the symbols on playing cards. There were small spade and club symbols in blue, green, red and yellow, all changing colour and morphing and rippling whilst everything else in my mind was black. By late afternoon, the peak had passed and started coming down. By the evening I felt virtually normal, although a bit tripped out in the brain, but not much. But the one thing that was clear to me was that mescaline is very different to LSD. Acid can make me feel totally fried after a trip and really screw with my mind for a few days, but that was not the case with mescaline. When the effects had passed, I felt normal and sane, and I could even eat well by the evening and slept well that night too. Would I do it again? Without a doubt. Next time I would keep the dosage similar, but maybe to go about 10 to 12, but not any more than that. But it won't be for a year or two at least. I feel like the path in front of me is clear and I know where I'm going now. To those that are interested in what this cactus could do for them, I have this advice. Set aside a weekend that you can just relax without the need to do anything in particular. Be somewhere where you don't have to cross busy roads or interact with strangers, and do not plan on driving, very bad idea. Take it in a natural setting, not in a club or at a rave, as it's not a party drug. And lastly, Have someone that you can call if you get into any type of trouble, someone that has experience in these matters for the best. With the above attention to setting, you will help yourself feel safer than you might if you just go at it randomly, as in an intoxicated space. Something as simple as telling the time or finding your way when you are lost can prove very challenging and create undue stress. Stay safe and good luck. San Pedro, unique from mushrooms, LSD, PCP or Jimson weed, is a gentle brush of mescaline, my all-time favourite psychedelic. Mushrooms, in my opinion, are too much of a tease, a pleasant, very enjoyable buzz. LSD is very good, a controlled chemical trip, but it too often occurs that acid leads to the fear and the ominous vibes that lead a tripping mind into a paranoid funk. PCP is not really for me, and Jimson weed was just plain madness. A 16-hour vacation from sanity. But mescaline is the laid back, but at the same time, extremely psychedelic drug to which I give the award. Mescaline in its purest form is of course far better than the San Pedro peyote. However, at least for me, pure mescaline has become frustratingly hard to find these days, only surfacing in a several week period every 5 to 6 months. So last week, I settled for the disgusting cactus slime. I bought a San Pedro cactus from a little shop on the edge of Austin. It was about 2 feet, a little son of a bitch, but it was going to have to do. So first, I skinned it. I've done this plenty of times before, and find that freezing the cactus in little sugar-covered chunks is the best way to get her done. Then I chopped it up, rolled it in sugar, and put it in the freezer. My parents are very cool, so I don't got to worry about them getting in my business. If I don't steal my mum's beer or my dad's weed, then my stuff is safe and sound. So I went to my senior prom, forgot about the cactus for a few days, and then on Tuesday I decided, what the hell, I'll go out into the woods and trip after school today. When school let out, I hopped into my truck and drove all the way across the street to my house. I grabbed the cactus out of the freezer and set out for an adventure. I don't normally trip during the daylight hours, but hey, I didn't care in the slightest. I drove to a nature preserve of about 200 acres, parked my truck and set off. I was equipped with 2 feet of San Pedro, a water bottle of orange juice and one of water, goggles, swimming trunks, a beach towel, a pair of garden gloves, 6 bananas and a kiwi, as well as my pipe and 2 grams of blueberry bud. I walked a forest path to a nice little swimming hole under a small waterfall, a beautiful spot surrounded by trees and moss-covered rocks. It was a wonderful place to enjoy nature in all her wonder as I began to trip. One of mescaline's most mystical charms is its ability to place you at one with your surroundings, and more accurately, at one with the earth. I laid out the towel in a nice shady patch of grass next to the water and sat down. Upon opening my backpack, I first took out the cactus, then the orange juice and the kiwi. Sitting cross-legged on the towel, I began to swallow down large hunks of the bittersweet cactus sugar and wash them down with gulps from the juice. After about 5 minutes, I had cleaned up on that cactus. It was in my belly and I felt like gagging, but the juice and the kiwi helped out. After I got over the nausea, I took out my pipe and a nice little nug to fill it with. I smoked for a while and got to feeling pretty high. Then, I set off on a scenic walk to some cliffs above the swimming hole and looked out over the woodland. It wasn't until about 45 minutes later that the mescaline began to sneak itself into my consciousness. I was sitting back on the towel in a state of stone meditation, a peaceful way of preparing for this sort of earthy trip, when I was brought back to reality by the first gentle touches of the drug. Tiny tingles of electricity were running through my veins, and a light feeling occurred in my head. At this point I took off my shoes and socks and waded out into the ankle-deep shallows and wondered at the sensation of the cool water and rough sand between my toes. I knew these things were becoming enhanced by the mescaline inside me. About 30 minutes later, the forest stood quiet with unknown anticipation. Then, a slight rustle stopped a bird in its tracks. Movement behind the bushes, ever so small, caused a squirrel to run for the trees. And suddenly, I burst from the bushes with a freshly carved spear, stick with a pointed end, held high in my hands. My primal instincts had taken over, and I decided to just let it flow. It was not insanity, but rather calculated madness that possessed me to do this. A rush of energy that could only be satisfied in the hunt. I ran around in the woods, seeing bizarre but natural flickerings in the shadows, hunting an imaginary but all too real prey. After a while at this point, I was at full body trip, but had not experienced more than a hint of visuals. I went back to my little spot and lit it up again. There we go, I was tripping now. The rays of late afternoon light glistened and seemed to weave translucent patterns in the air. A blue, transparent film of reflection hovered a foot above the water's surface, and all things around me swayed to an unknown, but all too familiar tune of perfect harmony. I saw things all around me in magnified radiance and altered coloration, and I knew that God was here. And this force of energy inside me and all things that moved around me in their instinctual routines was his ultimate masterpiece. Now, I'm not a very religious person at all. I believe all the separate sects of religion are just another means by which we can differentiate ourselves from one another, just another means of division and hostility. But I do believe, when I look at the wonders around me, that there is a God. And when I sat tripping and pondering the contours of this beauty, I gained some instinctual knowledge that the creator of all this innocent acceptance and harmony did not wish for us to do anything but to gaze in wonder at what we have been given and to be at one with it. The sun was burning down on me as the trip intensified. It was getting quite hot and I decided to take a swim. I stripped off my shorts and boxers and stood up straight, enjoying them warm from the soft breeze blowing across my naked body. It was soothing, and as I slipped into my swim shorts I saw lines of interweaving colours swirling around me, and patterns of sunlight making parts of the ground light up with a fire-like intensity. I got into the water and instantly became one with it. My body became a flowing river as I danced as one with the water's fluid current. I put on my goggles and examined with fascinated curiosity the underwater landscape of colourful harmony. Sometimes I would almost forget to come up and breathe, and after a while I felt it necessary that I be nude. So I slid off my shorts and began to propel myself speedily around in the cool water, marvelling at the strange sensations as the pull of the water caressed my body and I began to dance underwater in slow motion. Later, I sat upon a rock at the top of a nearby hill and felt an overwhelming sense of tranquility. I relieved myself off the edge of a cliff and watched the sky being painted many different vibrant colours by an invisible hand. The trip was subsiding, but the coloration of the sunset before me was still very enhanced, and I still felt the vibrations of nature. I was truly at one with the world, just where I needed to be. It was a great experience, and I wish the same to all who strive to explore its mysteries.